Hey, Sean, can you hear us?
My mom's that's really early, really early.
Hey, Sean, can you hear us?
And he,
Why do I need to be right?
Good morning.
I'm moving.
this mom's
Not all sitting over here, you know, like, I'll do this and that, but I put myself right back.
really was better than some of the doctors.
I
Oh,
see
no.
that's not. Often knows better.
So we'll start in just a second. Be right back. I
What you
hope-
did.
Well, we still don't know if it completely works. So,
How it's going. Not in-
long story short, Sean, we have new media equipment being installed and none of it's working.
Nice. Well, hopefully you can hear me in that room.
So this is the backup. This is the backup I put together under pressure in 10 minutes.
This feels better anyway. I feel a little intimidated presenting in the council chambers.
You can see us, but you can't see it.
I gotta get over there. Call him, Milan, see if he's got any.
You gotta get in front of this.
Oh, yeah, that way. Why am I doing it?
I'm going out. Venice, and I'm gonna take my chainsaw and I'm gonna cut a path. I'll get on that.
Are you talking about tires?
Yeah.
So I got I think I sent it to you. I got a response back from Mega, sorry, at high school. She's getting her troops together and she's gonna figure out if they can get people together on the 25th. And she'll do it as fast as she can. She's usually really quick, but they must be just underneath.
Milan, Derek couldn't get the rugby.
Right.
He's trying to get the football. Well, I'm supposed to be a Boy Scout. We can't get it all.
Well, then we
There's no reason to get
we may just
rid
have
of the
to,
tire.
we may have to do it some other time, yeah. And that's okay. It's been there a long time. It should be okay.
I'm gonna change that. I wanna see it more.
Don't kill them.
Okay, so before we get started, a couple of things. This is an open mic, so we're all being recorded. Congratulations.
Awesome.
You're saying that for me.
This is, yeah, kind of. I haven't heard. Yeah, he said he was. He told me he said he was. Yes. My granddad. I don't know if he forgot.
Sometimes it really,
I do have some laugh tracks ready, you know.
really.
There's something else I'll tell you before we start. Oh, so the microphone's in the center of the table, so you have, if you're far away, you have to project. You're fine.
I was gonna say. It was good.
You told your entire life to tone it down,
This,
and you don't
I
have
can
to.
ignore that today, yeah.
Oh,
I mean, yes, I have it.
that's the thing I always got in trouble for at school, was
Yeah.
talking too much and too loud.
Like, I was loud.
Okay, so the only one we're missing is Will. I'm gonna go get started in a second.
Oh, I also sent you a text about February the 18th, and we need to take it out and put it on your calendar. Oh, no,
I've
no.
got it. I've got it on the calendar.
What did you say? No, try to do. Let's try to do
Saturday night, Bruce.
8:30.
I've been trying to make reservations for 2.5
Jared, did you take 2 hours? Okay. My friends do that 6 months later. They do Valentine's on the 6-month rotation. Just pick another day.
Okay,
Stay
guys.
home, make her some dinner. Go down to the butcher shop down there and get some really good stuff.
I don't have a gavel, so. All right, we're gonna call this meeting of the Wayfinding and Branding Committee to order. It is 11:01 a.m. We have a quorum. We're just missing Will Owens. He said he was coming, so I guess he'll be here. First up, we need to adopt the agenda. Does anyone have any changes? Can I get a motion to adopt? Further discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Next up is adoption of the previous minutes from January 23rd. Does everyone have a chance to look at those? Okay. Any changes? Can I get a motion to adopt the minutes from January 23rd as presented? Christina. Further discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Okay. All right, Sean, turn it over to you guys.
Great. Well, thank you all again for meeting with us today and keeping us on track. I know we're running a pretty consistent, tight schedule on this, which has been really great so far. I think we've been able to move through the branding really well to this point, and I feel like the wayfinding, as I mentioned in one of our last meetings, is a lot more objective. So, I don't think we'll really run into too many hiccups through here, but today is probably the most subjective sort of meeting about wayfinding, because I'd like to share with you some design concepts I've been working on putting together. And so I have 4 different variations on some different ideas for you all to look at and consider, just kind of approaching the sign design from a couple different angles that I wanted to share with you. And then we can just talk about some of the mapping. There hasn't been a lot of updating on the mapping yet. Austin reached out to me a couple weeks ago and requested a rough estimate of the sign count that we sort of anticipate the system to consist of whenever we get to the end of it. So I went through the map and started really putting a lot of the sign locations on the map where I anticipate us having some signs. And right now, I think we're at about 26 signs. Some of those will most likely be later phase down the road as things sort of change on the ground and more developments happen. So that's sort of the current outlook on that, but we'll dig into that a little bit. But I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here.
And Sean, let me know if you have any issues sharing. I might have to change the settings. We just switched to Zoom, so everything's still, oh, never mind, you're good. I love it when things work.
Are you seeing the map?
We are.
Okay,
Yep, looks good.
All right, let me hit play on this here. Are you seeing the presentation?
We are.
Good deal. So as I mentioned, just going to walk through a couple of these design concepts and then talk about some of the inspiration, my thought process that went into them, and then we can jump back and forth. I've got all 4 of the concepts sort of laid out next to each other as well at the end, so you can kind of see them. And a lot of times whenever we show wayfinding designs, it's not necessarily a this or that sort of proposition we're proposing, but sometimes there are elements from the different systems that you may like that we can kind of combine into the final concept. So keep that in mind. If there's something you like in one of them, whether it's the color or the orientation or the material, we can use those and sort of like build out, the system using the different elements. So let's see here. So this is what we've seen already in the branding so far in the style guide, showing the banners, showing the community sign, the heritage district sign, even looking at the greenway and some of the other materials with the blade sign for the streets and the Marvin Eford Park, even looking at it from, a little bit more of that rustic sort of natural perspective is one of the ideas that kind of inspired me that I'll show, but just kind of wanted to refresh everybody on what we have seen. And then taking into consideration some of the other initiatives you all have undertaken with the design of the village hall and sort of looking at this clean look that you all have started to implement within the community, and how can we carry that over into a wayfinding system. And so, here are a couple of examples of some signs that sort of, to me, play off a little bit of that, those clean lines from the village hall, but just really trying to be refined with these. We don't want to be too overly ornate. I'm a big proponent of less is more when it comes to wayfinding. Overwrought designs look great in the portfolio, but they get very expensive very quickly. And I don't like seeing those commas keep adding up on the bottom line for a community. So, I really try to focus on, simplistic designs, but still have some character to them, still using the inspiration from, sometimes it's the built environment, sometimes it's the historic architecture of a community, but just wanted to try to find a couple different ways of approaching these concepts for Marvin. And you can even see here in the low speed, whenever we're looking at vehicular signage, we've got high speed, which is 35 miles an hour and above, and low speed, which is under 35 miles an hour. And I even included some of the potential roundabout arrows here, so you can kind of see what they might look like, because we will definitely be needing to use roundabouts and directional arrows when we start looking at the sign locations. So I just wanted to show some examples of that and how these can be oriented with 2 poles or on a single pole. And, as I continue to build this out and refine this, I'll be showing examples of what this will look like from the back as well, with some more watermarked logos, because we can't put directional information on the back panel because it's in the wrong location for decision making and it's on the opposite side of the road. But we can do some subtle branding, and just so that it reminds people where they are and kind of put them in context. So the next one here is a more simplified version where, we have this column here that could be like tube steel with a decorative panel in the middle of it that holds the logo and the community name. And then, these panels, I'm showing 3 destination panels just so to give a little bit of context of sort of the largest scale sign we'll see. That'll be another thing that as I continue to build this out and refine it, I'll show multiple examples of like single and 2 destination signs. And something that we may need to discuss and consider as we do work on this and looking at the sign locations and their content is making sure that we think about the future use of this. And if we want to do something that's panelized to where today it might only be 2 destinations, but we can foresee in a couple of years there being a 3rd destination, a new park or something in the pipeline down the road, that might be something we need to take into consideration. That being said, most often with signs, one of the most expensive components of a sign is actually putting the footer in the ground and putting the breakaway bolts and everything in there and having all that engineered and implemented. And the panels are fairly inexpensive. And keeping something like this where the center column is a fairly simple design, that would be more affordable as well if we needed to install a larger one for like 3 destinations as opposed to a 1 destination sign. And so here's something a little bit more refined. It goes in, plays off of some of the other signs that we've already shown in the system from the community, like the neighborhood pride signs that we talked about, those proud communities, and then the heritage district sign as well. And this is a simplified panel system with simple decorative poles, kind of based on some of the existing poles that are already found along some of your corridors in some of the communities. And that's another thing that I like to do whenever designing systems, is like that first one definitely has more fabrication involved in it. So I want to kind of show a spectrum of what we can do on a little bit higher end signs And then if we want to dial the budget back, the implementation expenses back a little bit, how can we make some attractive decorative panels that really would lower the cost of total implementation? But considering we're only looking at 20 to, somewhere in the mid low 20 sign, I think we're going to keep the overall system pretty manageable, whichever way we go. And then the natural one, again, looking at the Marvin Eford Park, and as well as even bringing in some of the material inspiration from the new gateway sign in front of the Publix. I wanted to play around with something that, brought some of those elements in here, still had the refinement of the new brand and, a little bit of that formality and that higher scale. But, something a little bit more decorative and has a little bit more of that natural tone to it, and playing off of, even evolving the Marvin Eford Park sign to give it a little bit of a different feel, but using similar elements. And so that's the 4 concepts as far as the designs go that I've been working on. So I'd love to hear some of your feedback and any questions that I might not have covered, or any questions that you have about, now that we're getting into, this project, what, the outlook is and just kind of what you're thinking.
Curious about the Publix. What was the process with them?
So the public signage came to the planning board, and it was something that Publix donated. They wanted to put a sign up that says "Welcome George Marvin." They obviously with Publix's name on it, but it went through the planning board design review process and was approved. And that was installed. That was installed pretty much right when we were getting this process, but it started the logo on it.
So is there going to be a process to have it changed, to update it?
We could ask Publix, but we might have to pay to have a piece of the new logo put on there, like the tree, or switch it out. But that'll be a discussion to have whenever we get down to implementation of more of the wayfinding.
Because that thing is nearly impossible to read as you're driving by.
Okay.
Yeah,
You have to stare at it.
I don't like black letters on it.
You
It's
have
hard
to
to
stare really intent to, read any of it.
Crossing
Right,
Providence Road.
exactly. I mean, but is that one of the wayfinding points that was already considered? I wonder. It was not. They just did it, okay.
Yeah.
They wanted, like, certain crest has a giant sign out front, like, they wanted like something, and then they wanted to make sure that it limited within Marvin.
Okay.
Yeah, we're definitely gonna swap out the seal. And the question is, we're gonna swap it out with the new seal, or we're gonna swap it out with the tree?
And then you have to do, if you want to do accompanying typeface too, so you want to make it an actual monument sign that's more consistent with the
And
brand.
something else that Minnie has brought up, village at Marvin, at the entrance of Marvin Creek.
Yeah. That has to be.
It's just villages at Marvin.
Villages
It
at
needs to
Marvin,
be
yeah.
hot dog.
I'm curious about how, so that's just something I was thinking about, just like, trying to minimize as much confusion as possible whenever all this stuff starts being put out, and installed. And, if it's somewhere close to that, and if somebody sees R and then sees that, it's like, what is this?
Well, we're going to have a lot of questions about implementation when we get to that point. But as far as the designs they brought today, what do you all think?
Right.
I've got, I like everybody else's comment. I think having North Carolina on any of the village Marvin signs is stating the obvious and just takes up space. I'd rather see a consistent message, Village Marvin, and rich by nature, if that's what we're going to go with. Everybody knows we're in North Carolina.
But that's a good point, because we're so close to South Carolina.
Literally, my property was.
Yeah, so that does, that is a point to make, for sure.
Do y'all think we should have North Carolina?
I agree with you, Bob. I think
Everybody.
I don't have a vote here, but I see the point you're making.
I like the third one. I like
Yeah.
the natural elements. If we're
And the park
speaking
sign was
nature
really
by
nice.
nature. And and we stick with the natural elements of rocks and away from the metal. as much as
Yeah.
possible.
Rough stone
The
wood.
most
like-
expensive.
I mean, it can be faux, don't get me wrong, but it, at least
Yeah.
it looks,
Yeah.
you know, has that brown.
I agree with you. I think-
Kim.
No, sure.
Oh, I mean, you know me, I'm all in.
No, I think I would rather, I would rather sacrifice numbers for quality. And as we go forward, if we need to add signs, we add signs, but I don't wanna give up the quality of the look. Marvin is a special place and we have an opportunity to market that. And if we start putting cheap up, I think it diminishes what we wanna accomplish.
You say fewer signs, but higher quality
Correct.
looking.
Correct.
One thing that I noticed,
More signs.
one thing that I noticed about that third design is since it focuses more on the natural and like with wood, how much did it cost for us to do park signs? That was something that we did with Eagle Scouts. Do you know how much
Yeah.
the price of that was?
Yeah, that's fine.
I like $1,000 compared to some of the prices I've seen so far. My principal concern is the cost of the signs and the funding.
Now, $1,000 does not include the sign itself, Derek did that. I'm
Mhm.
talking about.
No, wood. And
Everything.
that's gonna be the most expensive thing.
Well, you did the sign itself.
Yeah, we
Oh,
don't-
you just
Mhm.
put it together and, yeah.
Can we at least eliminate number 4 there? Do you think?
I don't care.
Just eliminate
It
at least
looks
that
like
one?
a puzzle.
And,
And that's why I had it.
I really
you should see the whole thing because it's kind of,
It's round, right? It's probably round.
can you bring that in a little bit? Because it's kind of cut off at the end with the video. Just to make sure we get the whole thing. Is there any way?
But I could see that, general design as like a 6x6 timber. You know, maybe you have an angled, 45, 2x4 at the bottom of it, but as a solitary post.
Yeah,
So
single.
it's sort of a simplified version, number 3.
Yeah, I mean,
Again, I'm trying to see if there is,
It just,
Sean, is there any way you can bring that,
It's not him, it's.
oh,
we gotta
just
move
this one?
this over.
Oh,
That's
okay.
us, our
Just to
view.
get the whole bit, there we go, there we go. I was just curious. I didn't know they had some rounded edges or anything. Good, thank you.
Oh, I'm glad that worked. I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Okay, Kim. Oh, and Kim.
which that is my favorite, and I do like it a lot. Is it too rustic? Is it gonna look too much like we're up in the mountains?
I don't think.
The one thing I would say about that, to make it not as much, is like to post the black. That's an alternative. So you're actually combining the black metal with the wood and making it black post. But it's still wood or faux wood or whatever. Wood, I would rather see.
I mean,
Because I've seen lots of
That's
columns.
dark
that are
brown,
black.
that's
Yeah.
not black.
Yeah, and it's still obviously wood, because you can see
Yeah.
like the knots.
Yeah, I like
which again, I like that. But my question is it gonna be look too much like we're up in the mountains? I feel like, I mean, that instinctually, that's where my eye goes, like I love that, but I also
Oh,
feel like
agree.
it's very rustic.
Yeah, one of the other things I thought about when designing this that I felt provided justification for it was some of the equestrian heritage that we heard a lot about in our input, and thinking about like horse farms and fencing and barns and things. So, I was trying to think less about like rustic mountain town and a little bit more, like equestrian agricultural sort of region. And so that was kind of my thought process, but, I'll leave it to you all to how you interpret it.
Sean, would you say this is if you were thinking about how this was going to be priced out, where would this option rank? Is this going to be more expensive, or is there a way to say costs? Or
That's a really good question, because this one's a bit different than any others that I've designed in the past. Usually I'm designing mostly around metal poles and, you know, that type of fabrication. I think that this is going to be pretty comparable because wood is definitely going to be cheaper than the steel poles. There is a little bit of fabrication involved still, you know, making sure everything's cut well and stained and treated properly. You know, so I think it's pretty well, I think it would balance out kind of probably like mid, maybe a little higher than mid range. For, you know,
What about stone? The materials for the base, the stone base, is there a difference in footings on this versus the pole mounted?
Probably, yeah. And, you know, there's different, some people have faked out, you know, even like down here in Malden on the interstate, they've got a brick sign that looks like brick, but it's actually foam that, you know, from the interstate, you don't really notice unless, you know, it's one of your brands and you stare at it every time you drive by and you'll pick up the details and realize it's a weirdly oversized foam looking brick. You know, so there are ways around, you know, doing the stone. The stone works really well here, especially for the park sign and things. One of the things, and I did show it on here in the rendering, but that before we went forward with putting the stone footing on every sign, I think that it would be good to have a conversation with DOT about that as well, since some of these are going to be in the right of way and we do need breakaway. So the stone footer here might be a little bit more just for decoration, whereas whenever we actually start putting them in the ground, they may just be going into the ground or, you know, into a base that is DOT approved for breakaway concerns.
So, but that means we might have some that don't have a stone on them, which would be fine with me, because that looks a little odd in some context. I have another question about the,
I don't want foam.
we weren't gonna do that. The, I don't know if it's called a cove cut or what, the little curvy cut, I'm showing you Jake. You can see me, on the horizontal bars.
The rounded
Mhm.
edges.
That, I know it's part of the sign below it, but within it, but like I would like to see a version with straighter cuts, like the vertical. I'm talking about these little coves. Oh, all that. I just don't. I don't love that, but then I like straight lines on things. I just told Bob this looks like my house, so it's very straight. That's just my opinion.
Everything else.
You need to go.
I know.
That's an easy option to show.
Yeah, it cleaned it up a little bit, but then the signs themselves have that little whatever curve on them. What is that called? What is that little curve called?
That's a good question. I'm sure there's an actual term for it. I call it like a notch or a chamfer. It's not really a chamfer. That's more along the edge, but yeah.
I know what the friend says code, so that's why I listened to it. So could you show us a version that had no code that was, you know, with an angle cut and without the stone? You just couldn't see it.
Absolutely.
Look fine. That way. But obviously not for the big sign, the one on the fourth one, you gotta have something holding all that up. You gotta have stone on that.
I think it gives a little bit more dimension. Just have it straight all over is,
Yeah, it's
I mean,
just-
just think about it, you know.
It catches my eye and I'm just sitting there looking at all the little curves and instead of looking at what I'm supposed to be looking at. That's just me.
I love that this has character. That's why I really like it. This has character. Like I don't like plain.
The concept.
Yeah. I think it relates well into the current park signage.
Good, I really like that.
Yeah.
That's into the whole nature.
Mhm.
Also thought that Derek had about 6x6 instead of the 2 4x4s going up was a good thing. Yeah, that's nice. I like that. Even the big.
So what do you think on that? Should you guys like the 2-post or would you want
You have to nail down the specifics, or
Right.
can each one be different?
If it's
but-
beefier
but
is
we,
more,
but we agree on the basic elements. I mean, And I don't see mountains. I know what you mean by being too mountainy, but I don't see that as a mountain.
Sean, Aaron, can I ask you a funding question?
Of course.
Are there any grant opportunities out there for funding these types of signs? I've done a little bit of research, but I know that obviously I'm going to prefer to do stuff immediately, but I know that we have our own budget realities here. So are you aware of any grant opportunities?
There are some, and Sean, I'm sorry.
No, please,
First of all,
you're probably more up to date on this than I am.
Sorry that I started coughing as soon as I started talking. There are some things that are out there. I mean, the reality of it is you're probably going to have to find various funding streams. Most of the time, not all the time, maybe not even most, but more times than not, these things are funded through hospitality taxes. Now, I know y'all don't necessarily have that at the town of Marvin. Even if you did have a hotel, you don't have that. But some of our communities have the ability to go after funding from their county CVBs. Again, it might be a little bit more, but that's where the funding comes from. They often want to tie it to increasing stays in a community if that's the case. And of course, again, Marvin's a different world when it comes to that. Y'all may not have that option, but that's one of the sources that it comes from quite a bit. Occasionally we've seen, and actually once I stop talking, I'm going to pull up a previous report and see if I can find some additional information, but we have seen some transportation improvement grant monies be used to help fund these. I know that's been done in North Carolina. So that's an example. I have seen communities. I mean, y'all aren't a Main Street community, but there are Main Street funds that are out there that probably would not be something you would be eligible for. I think in terms of grants themselves, depending on what you would pursue, you could probably find a way to tie this into it. But those are the ones that I know that I've seen used more often than not. And other than general funds, and that's, obviously that wasn't your question, Austin, but, one thing to keep in mind about these is, even the most simplest of signs that we could design for you are going to have costs obviously associated with them. And while yours is a small system compared to other places, you would probably be like those other places in that you'd phase this over multiple funding years. And again, I know Sean's talked to y'all about this in detail, but that'll be part of the plan itself and our implementation strategy on, doing all the cost estimates and then putting together that implementation plan to say, hey, let's look at this first. Maybe it's gateways first, maybe not because they're the most expensive, maybe what have you. But those are some of the cost considerations you got to keep in mind. I know that's a lot more than what you just asked for, but I guess the short answer is there are monies that are out there. Maybe for you, it might be tied to transportation enhancements. But even, there's parks and recreation monies that are out there. There may be specific signs that you're able to tap in to those resources. And we can do, when we get towards the end of the plan, we can definitely give more guidance on that as we do a little bit more research. So, but I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to open up another report while y'all keep talking and see if I have any more detail on that.
Thank you, Aaron.
Sean, I think your point of talking to DOT is very important because they're probably not going to let us put stone in some places. They're going to call back, if there's an accident, people are going to get seriously hurt. So can you show us some of these wood signs that don't have the stone at the bottom, just so we can just see what it looks like?
Absolutely.
And add that into kind of the direction that we're going. But I mean, that's a giant consideration that we really do need to think about. also, I feel like this group needs to make a decision. Are we gonna go with a tree on these types of signs? Or do we want to go with the new seal on these types of signs? Or do we want a combination?
I mean,
What's our goal here?
right now we're looking more towards what the signs are gonna look like. We can have the discussion over the logos. Yeah.
Like, what's gonna be on them? Are they, and are they gonna be blue or green?
Yes, I think you might be talking about signs like the frame.
I was talking more framing and shape, just so they didn't have a good, clear direction to go on. But yeah, we can definitely talk about colors and logos.
What is to nail down this palette, and then maybe see if there's like a spec sheet that could be developed that says, if it's a gateway sign, it's this size with this size post used, but if it's just a destination on a trail, then, all you need is 2 4x4. If it's a,
I think these guys need to guide us on what's normally used.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. 'Cause
And the only reason I don't wanna go too far down that route is because it's not,
certain that we can have this done.
well, no, not even that, but it's not the committee's decision. I mean, sorry, but it's not. So, I mean, council's gonna look at, council's not gonna want one. I'm just gonna tell you that right now.
No, what? Why?
They're not gonna want, they do not want one option. You guys have seen 4.
Oh, just. Oh, I thought you meant number 1.
Not,
There's not,
okay, everybody stop, please. Sean showed us 4 options, correct? Council is not gonna want to see one option. They're gonna wanna see at least 2 options. You're gonna need to narrow it down to 2. So I don't wanna go too far down the road of the spec sheet, which I do like that idea a lot. I don't wanna go too far down that road until council can pick one or the other.
And whenever they give us the final plan for this, there will obviously be the specs in there, because we'll have to go get signs made. So we'll definitely have that.
But I definitely wanna know about
I need to recognize. I need to recognize.
Okay, Mindy has a question.
Just a quick question. I really like how they look. Is everybody okay with the village of Marvin being this way and not across the top? I just want to go over it really quick. Are you okay with it reading that way, or would you rather have it across the top? Just, are you okay with it being sideways like that? I think it's very pretty. It's balanced. It's nice. I just want to make sure everybody's okay with that.
I like it.
What do some people have?
Well, so driving by really quickly.
If it's not the main thing you're reading.
Yeah.
I just have crazy.
No.
So as far as you guys talk about what logos to put on the sign, the one consideration I would tell you is that, so for the seal, that's our governmental logo that more represents the government side of the town. But as far as the tree, that's more of your community logo, more than just the government. That's the entire community as a whole, and that was the purpose of having the tree. So
I'm fine. It's just a question.
Yeah.
I'm just asking.
I'm just wanting to
Yeah,
remind you
I
all.
mean, I'm fine, because obviously the only thing we had before was the seal, which is why it's up on public. I don't particularly think that is appropriate. Yeah, I think the tree would probably be better, but as we roll this out, I'm just asking that
Yeah.
question.
And I did want to elaborate a little bit on your discussion. There's a couple things I want to make sure that I'm clear on, just so I know that I've at least said it, that we will be providing the specifications for a lot of the dimensions of these signs, as far as how far they are off the ground, the size of the lettering, the distance from the lettering, the size of the arrows, and the panel dimensions themselves. We will be providing all of that. We'll also be creating all of the sign panels that we will show on the map. We will provide all those graphics so that whenever you take them to a fabricator, they can just basically take those files and recreate them in aluminum and vinyl. That being said, there are some things that, since we're not an engineering firm, we can't provide, and your fabricator will be able to do that once they start looking at the design of this. And so whenever we're talking about like a 4x4 post or a 6x6 post, the signs will need to be engineered to make sure that they withstand the sign load, the wind load, all of that stuff. So there may be some variations between what we're seeing on the screen now and what actually ends up being put in the ground. But what we hope to establish is the look and feel and the style that we're going for, that we can keep as close to the concept as possible through implementation. But there might be some variations in between now and implementation, because we're working in like 2D here without any load testing or anything like that. So once engineering gets involved with fabrication, there may be some subtle adjustments that need to be made in the overall design to make sure that they stand the test of weather and time and the elements.
Okay, well, I think we're good there. That definitely makes sense. As far as what Kim was saying before, like narrowing it down, still providing council with options. Let's go back and look at the 4 options again.
Do you want to walk through? Do you just want to see this, or do you want me to walk through each one?
No, that's good. I mean, I
Okay.
think we all agree that the wood, the stone one is this committee's favorite.
Preference, yes.
Okay, so if that turns out that for some reason it comes back and it is just crazy expensive or whatever, what's number 2?
Number 1 looks as expensive too, right? You like number 1. I mean, you like the 3rd one as the number 1. So
Yes.
what's your number 2?
It's the one that furthest left. I personally don't care for number 2 because it's so flat. And
Yeah.
I don't, you don't ever want anyone ever to think of it in the same realm as a DOT sign.
Well-
I like 1 and 3. Those are, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you like 4 there? Do you? I agree. It looks like a popsicle. That the bottom one looks like a popsicle.
But if you change it to a 6x6 post, then, I mean, I just don't like black metal.
Doesn't have to be black.
I am gonna go back, I'm not gonna give up on this, that number 1 sign over here. That 90-degree angles on the corners, and I like that. And these have all these little curvy things on them, and I don't love those. They are distracting me.
Christina, do you have OCD?
I must.
You
So
love
I would
Frank,
just like to see one where there aren't any of those little curvy things.
you love Frank Lloyd Wright.
But for reasons like, as you're driving, you see it. I am very distracted by those little curvy things, because it's the only place that we see curves, except our cool logo, that's a circle. See, then it kind of brings back to.
Does anyone else have that same concern?
Part-
Him
part
to
of the problem.
redo these and remove the curves, or we ask him to do that? Anyone?
Okay, then just leave it alone.
Okay. Curves are staying.
On the record of saying, I don't like.
And I will say, if if the issue with number 3 comes down to budget, and that for whatever reason we get into looking at getting some quote estimates on what they would cost to fabricate and all, I don't think number 1 is going to be any cheaper, because there is more sort of ornamentation to this with the frame and the different fabrication that goes into that one. Now, if we're looking at budgetary considerations, number 2 is definitely going to be sort of the cheapest option here, because we're looking at just some simple black poles and some simple panels that are fabricated. There's not really a lot to this, and so that would, if it comes down to budget, that's just something I would consider.
I mean, I think this committee's 1 and 3 are fave. So I know that there's a little bit of tweaking that we need to kind of look at, but I would say those 2 would be what we would take to council. What else do you need from us, Sean?
Now I've got as far as the design goes, that's pretty concise. I've got a couple options here I am going to play around with, converting some of those cove cuts into just maybe 45-degree angles, simplify that a little bit, try that out, remove the stone. try an option where it's dark wood instead of the brown wood, a little bit closer to black. To just show what that would look like to kind of match up with what the Marvin Eford Park's already doing. So I'm just going to put a couple of those options, and I can do that in an email and send you all a link to that so you can kind of review it and give your thoughts back to Austin, that he can collate everything and share back with me.
Sounds good.
So as far as the design go, that I'm good with that.
Quick question on the design, Sean. If let's say we're doing number 3 and we have destinations in mind, but we know what we envision to be destination number 3 isn't ready yet. What would be the cost of like adding that in or replacing that panel? Is that something large that's worth thinking about? Or when does
as I mentioned in a lot of the quotes that we've received in doing this over the past few years, the panels are one of the least expensive components in a wayfinding sign. Typically, the most expensive parts are the footer and the poles. And so like replacing a panel is typically inexpensive. You're talking out of the thousands of dollars that the one sign costs to fabricate and install. The panels are typically a couple $100. That being said, one of the things that we need to keep in mind is the thing about wayfinding is they have to start the panel height has to be 7 feet off of the ground. So they start at 7 feet and go up from there. So if we're looking at saying we only have one destination down this corridor right now, but we foresee in a couple of years, we're going to have a new park or a new destination down there that we know in like 3 years, we're going to have 2 destinations, then that's something we want to try to plan ahead for and maybe put the pole and the infrastructure in for a 2 destination panel, but only put 1 destination panel in or something like that. That's just something we're going to have to, try to figure out so that we can plan ahead. Because if we know it's going to happen in a couple of years, there's no sense in spending thousands of dollars now on everything if we know we're going to have to redo it just down the road, if we can figure out what that design looks like. Because one of the things I'm going to have to look at is right now with 3 destinations, it works having the logo up top and Village of Marvin sort of vertical under there, but with a 2 destinations panel, what does that look like? When the logo comes down and the Village of Marvin gets reduced, do I stack the Village of Marvin then? And whenever we get into 1 destination and it gets even shorter, is it just the logo? Is it, the logo and Village of Marvin sort of stacked in that side panel? So those are all things that, as we sort of start narrowing in on one design direction, I'm going to have to start thinking a little bit further down the road anyway of how these things are going to be designed. So I think it's a really good question that I don't necessarily have the answer for right now, but that is definitely something that's going to be part of my thought process as I continue to build it out.
Sounds good.
My concern is that we'll love number 3 until you all see
Run
it
into
with
it.
only 1 destination, and then it's like, ooh,
Yeah, I have a-
Thank you, Steve. Question, can we see number 1 on the left with the color palette of number 3? Yeah, I like the color palette.
It's more dark color palette.
Yeah, I'd like to see him do a version of number 1 in that color palette to present to council. So,
Apple to apple to bit.
yeah, I think it will be a more attractive sign.
So Sean, can you do that? Just mock up number 1 with the color palette that you used at number 3.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, everything that you all have mentioned so far, I will be working on as soon as we get off of this call, and I will send that updated PDF over to you all this afternoon so that you can kind of see some of the variations, and I'll label and number everything so that moving forward, we can kind of reference, 1A, 1B with the different color palettes, or 3A, 3B, and 3C with some of the different design options. But yeah, I'll definitely get those over to you today. So these are all very, very easy tweaks to make.
Okay.
Thanks.
So are we good on design for today? All right, Sean, we're good.
Great. So I will just jump over to the map real quick. Y'all can see this still. And, I don't know. I know I shared this with Austin. I don't know if he shared it out or if it was just more of an exercise that he was working on, but did just want to kind of jump in here to bring you all up to speed of where we are right now as far as the mapping goes. And, everything's kind of blue right now, and I'll continue to refine and color code things so they stand out a little bit more. We've got our routes set up here that Austin and I went over a while back, and he helped me understand some of these connector routes. We've labeled on here a couple of roundabouts that will probably be happening in the coming years. And that's one of those things that's kind of going to inform a little bit of our design process now, as far as phasing strategies and sign design, making sure that we're not spending money to put signs in right now that maybe in a year or two we'll want a different design on it. So if we can hold off on some of those that coming from some of these secondary routes aren't going to be critical signs to the system anyway. But looking at our destinations here, with some of the schools, the parks, the village hall, even with consideration of like Firethorn, and how if there's a way that we can incorporate, even though it's a private destination, it's a large destination, and it's one that a lot of people are coming into and through Marvin to get to, and so trying to figure out the balancing act there is going to be one of the things we might need to address with DOT in one of our follow-up meetings with them, or just an email to the engineer that we've already met with, to just run that by him and see what he says about that. And so, as I mentioned, looking at the Trailblazers, we're at 26 right now. There is a bit of a density of those around, the traffic circles, especially. You've got these two traffic circles that sort of, abut one another, and making sure that we're orienting people through those. Thankfully, in looking at the distances between those two, we do have plenty of clearance that once you're between them, we can still have some signage to make sure people know which way to go at the next roundabout. And also looking out here at Publix was another interesting one, and we talked to the DOT engineer about this as well, because one of the questions we had early on was about unincorporated areas and making sure that we can put signs in locations that the village hasn't annexed yet, but as long as they're unincorporated and the village is maintaining them and taking ownership of maintenance and all of that, that he didn't really see it there would be any problem in that. So that's good out here. I forget what, along Providence, because we do have a couple of ingress routes there that we want to definitely orient people to get over to the village. So, these are just some of the locations right now, and I will include this link as well. Again, Austin, if you have shared it, great. If not, then I'll give that link again, so that with the PDF updates that I send over later, you also have the link to this map, so you can kind of drive around yourselves, look at some of the locations, provide any feedback and input that you have, if we've forgotten any potential destinations, or if you have any questions or comments about any of the sign locations, please feel free to provide all of that, so that we can make sure that we're making as informed decisions as we possibly can on these locations. And right now, there's no content on the signs. That's one of the next big things on my to-do list for this as well, is really start digging into the content on all of these signs, so we can start narrowing down and making sure that we're getting people where we need them to go.
Sounds good. I have not shared this yet, so you all will see this later today.
John, are all these signs,
26, yeah.
26 signs or 26 destinations.
26 signs.
Okay. That's gonna be a lot.
Yeah.
Oh, I know, I already-
I'm just, Sean, I'll just let you know that council has we try to do less signage. Less is always more. It's just sign pollution, so we try to do less. So I'm just letting you know that 26 is not even gonna, I mean,
And that's, I understand that, and that is perfectly fine. I am, I'm a big proponent of less is more myself as well. But what this is sort of the big picture. And like, if we were sort of orienting and navigating from all of these ingress routes, this is what it could look like. And so what we more than likely will end up doing is being able to sit down and say, okay, what is our primary objective for destinations? What are our primary focal points for the corridors? And what are the necessary signs we need along those corridors to get to those destinations? And then we can really start to refine it. But I typically start with putting as like all the locations and all the decision points and signs from each direction coming in. And then it's easier to dial it back instead of like starting at one intersection and then just sort of building out from there. So that'll be an easy exercise for us to get to that point. And so we've got some time, I think, before we need to put the map in front of council, that I can work on building content and we can work on refining this down to what you're confident to put in front of council.
Eric?
You may have mentioned this, but we have an issue here with roundabout safety. And I just want to make sure, like, when you guys are making these suggestions, you take into account the number of lanes that are in a roundabout and how much time people need to change their mind about which way they're going and that sort of
Yes,
thing.
yeah, we'll be providing recommendations based on MUTCD specifications as far as distance from the intersection for where the sign should go. And whenever you get into the permitting process, that will also be when probably with your sign fabricator, where they'll actually go and put it down, down to the foot of like, it's going to go in this very specific spot. We will give as accurate as a recommendation as we possibly can via maps and looking at existing infrastructure. We don't want to recommend you put a sign in somebody's driveway or behind a tree that's there. So we will do, we will place these as specifically as we can, but that will get much more granular whenever you get into the permitting process for fabrication and installation.
Is this committee tasked with setting priorities for sign locations? You've got 26.
Yeah, so you guys will make recommendations, and then you guys will make recommendations for the plan, and then they'll talk about phasing and the actual plan, and that'll go to council for final approval.
This one didn't know how many council wants in our preparation for making
Well,
suggestions.
I think the way to
we
approach
can't
it-
answer that.
So
I
what,
think the way to approach it, at least for me, egress signs are to me a priority in terms of, the boundaries of Marvin,
Mhm,
because I never know when I'm in it. When I'm
mhm.
That's what I'm looking
Well, keep in mind, we're,
We're gonna need that word.
yeah, keep it,
I'll-
so I definitely, I understand, I think that's a different objective though, just because we're a bit Swiss cheese, so,
Well, I'm talking about on primary routes.
yeah.
I'm not talking about 50,
Mhm.
but for me, the priority for the signage is to let people know if I'm coming from Providence Road, I'm coming from Providence Church.
Yeah.
And I'm in the village of Marvin.
The gateway,
Yeah.
I think.
When you do,
Yeah, those are
the public
gateways.
sign is in ICD. Yeah, the actual sign location at Publix for Marvin, that's ICD. Right.
That's,
So is that in Marvin or out?
it's in Marvin, it's in Marvin, it's our ICD that we. Yeah.
Okay.
One thing I think it's important to note is, for example, we talked about there being some signs in unincorporated areas.
Right.
And part of that is you want people, if we ever want to really annex these areas, you want people to get used to the idea that, hey, I live in Marvin, even if they don't. You want to get people used to the point where they're thinking of themselves as a member of the Marvin community. Because if you're detached completely from Marvin, you're less likely to ever want to actually officially be in Marvin. Do you know what I mean?
You want them to know they're not in Marvin and say, oh, I would like to be in Marvin.
My point is, like, you have to have some signs that are like in the unincorporated area, so you're still navigating people to Marvin.
And who are we-
So that'd be through the county. That'd be through the county and talking to DOT. So
And so
the
there's
principal,
no authority over the big Southern Spirit sign. Nothing.
that's not in Marvin.
I know.
And it's in the DOT right away and the county does not regulate their signs as heavily as Marvin does. But we
Maybe-
tried.
Maybe with the community petition.
So couple other things with the signs. What you saw initially in the branding portion, the Village of Marvin community signs, those will be very useful in delineating Marvin neighborhoods from non-Marvin neighborhoods. But as far as this today, what do you all think? As far as the sign locations and sign count, we'll obviously get more into that down the line. I definitely don't think that's a conversation for today. Sean, what else are you looking for today in regards to the map?
In regards to the map, I don't think I'm really looking for much of anything. I just wanted to make sure that we did address it and bring it up, and I wanted to share it with you all. And so I think that's something that we can coordinate more, via email and feedback as I refine this. I totally get that this is more, even Aaron commented afterwards, he's like, that's more signs than I thought that they were going to have. And he had to jump off for a 12 o'clock call that he had, but this is probably more signs than you will end up with, especially in early phase. If we're talking 2 or 3 phases, which isn't abnormal for a community to do.
Probably 3 or 4 phases.
One of the things. School, we know cost of signs or some
estimate.
approximation of it. For us to go to council and recommend number of signs, because I think signs are going to vary by location. If it's a gateway sign, it's going to look different from this type of sign. So when will we have
That's going to be further down the line. One thing what I will note is that regardless of what it costs, it's going to be phased just because we don't have the money. So even if we're recommending a few more signs or a few nicer signs, it's just going to add a couple more years to the phasing approach.
So I guess my next comment would be, if we're going to talk about mapping, I don't think we need to have Sean on the lines with us to sit down once we get the map and with the council or the committee, we come to a conclusion, this is the way we like to approach this, and you go back to them and say, here's what our thoughts are.
I would rather keep them on the call for this just because they know much more about where signs are effective. That's one thing we want to make sure. We don't want to put signs in a place that doesn't make sense or take away signs that actually carry towards our goals, if that makes sense.
John, do we have signs up there currently that don't make sense?
Well, you know what I mean? Like if you wanted to put a sign somewhere else, like that's not
We're
on.
gonna add it.
Yeah.
more. I think we're gonna go off whatever he has. I would absolutely recommend putting this out.
Mhm.
Let everybody look at it, but I would also like to know at point number 1, what exactly do you think should go on point 1? Point 15, what do you think should be on point 15? Like, I
What
think,
type of sign?
well, what type and what are you directing us for? Like, what is it?
I think right now, instead of you all worrying about that logic puzzle of what the content is on the signs, I think let me worry about those details. If you will focus on the corridors that you feel are most important, like where is the most visitor oriented traffic that you want to make sure you're getting, like you're curating the experience through the village. What are what do we want to expose people to from Providence Road, from Ray Road, these other, these big corridors. We want to get them into Marvin Eford Park. We want to get them to Village Hall. Those are the destinations that I need to know, like, these are our primary focal points, and these are the corridors we want to focus on. And that will really help us.
The focal point, I think, the Marvin Heritage District, which is becoming the Marvin Town Center. That's the focal point. Everything,
Years from now. Yeah, I mean,
well, that's all coming together.
And this will be in plans. Keep in mind, this is going to be in plans. We're planning for the future, not just for
Right,
today.
that's what I'm saying.
They have that in mind. We've talked about that in depth with them.
And that intersection of Crane and Newtown, looks like it's got a lot of signs there, and none of that is within the Marvin district.
Mhm.
I mean, that's interesting.
You're directed.
Directing people into
Like the
Marvin.
park.
Right.
These people are willing to work.
And one of the other things that I will do before we reconvene next is I will look into NCDOT traffic data and see what some of these corridors are as far as their traffic count, because there's two objectives we often look at, and most of the communities we've worked in before are different, not all. There's some that are fairly similar to Marvin in that you don't have a downtown district, you don't have a commercial cluster in your downtown that we're trying to curate that experience, because often locals know the way around the busy section of town. And with wayfinding, we're trying to navigate people through that busy section. We want people to go and see the businesses. We want them to see the destinations, the services, the activities in the parks that are happening in that busy cluster of downtown. But one of the other things we want to do, and I think this is what I heard Austin talking a little bit to earlier, was we want to build community pride. We want to remind people that they are within sort of the character area of Marvin, even if they're not in the municipal annexed boundaries of Marvin. And if it's unincorporated, if I had the boundaries on here, you've got this kind of crescent moon that encapsulates Marvin Eford Park and this intersection, but technically this is all unincorporated in here. But there's no reason why you shouldn't sort of put your stake in the ground and say, you might not be in the municipal boundaries of our community, but you are definitely in the character boundary of our community. And so that's one of the other things that we'll keep in mind as we look at sign placement is, as we get people, traveling from some of these different corridors, that we're maintaining sort of that character presence.
I asked this question again,
And-
or it's been asked, but I'm gonna ask it again. What exactly are we doing at the next meeting?
When is the next meeting? I'm sorry.
The next meeting is scheduled for Monday, March 13th.
So, okay. Yeah, that gives me plenty of time.
At the next meeting, what do you want to get taken care of on?
So if in the meantime, after I share this, and you all can provide me a little bit of feedback on the corridors that we want to focus on, and we don't have a lot of destinations, so we're not really narrowing that down a tremendous amount, but again, sort of prioritize and give me a hierarchy of the destinations we want to focus on. That will help me call the sign number down, which shouldn't be difficult at all, just like calling out Crane there. I mean, the chances that we need 4 of those signs are low, and definitely not in phase 1. That could be phase 3 or 4, looking down the road a number of years. And then I will start digging into sign content that we can, share as well. So, I mean, as far as the next meeting goes, it might just be a review of getting everybody back together and seeing the fruits of all of the feedback from today's meeting and, the follow-up feedback that we get. And so if we feel like we can do that over email and we don't need to reconvene, then that's a decision we can make. Or, if we want to reconvene, because I will hopefully by then have more feedback on the designs and have the system more built out and more robust with more examples. I'd like to get into some of the greenway signage and updating that and showing how the whole system will be. That's your decision whether we want to do that in a meeting or via.
Okay. So you want to know, next meeting, you want us to tell you what the destinations are in Marvin that you want us to focus on, we want you to focus on.
And
So,
he does.
hold on, just the destinations, is that what I'm understanding?
And the corridors, sort of where you feel, and I'm going to also, like I mentioned, do research into NCDOT data to look at traffic counts to make sure that we're taking that in consideration as well. But you all, you live there, you drive through here, we picked up a lot while we were there driving around a few times, but you have a local understanding of it. So getting an understanding of making sure that we're focusing on the corridors that you feel are the most important to Marvin as well. That will help us really kind of, no pun intended, but like the intersection of those two data points will help us narrow down what signs are critical to early phase and then later phase.
You want that before the meeting. Why would we wait 3 weeks to give him that, right? Am I wrong?
Correct.
I just don't know what is on this map right now that are not corridors that we would focus on. They're all corridors that we would focus on. And I'm not sure the destinations, there's like 4, like we don't have enough destinations to make this like a thing. Okay, so that's my point. My point is, I need to know what is going to be on sign number 10, what is going to be on sign number 14, because at that point, then I can say, this is where we need to focus. We want to focus on sign number, whatever that star is up near 6 Mile Creek Greenway, like that's coming into Marvin. I know what that's going to be. That's going to be a gateway sign. Those are the things that we need to focus on. If I do not think that anybody on this committee is going to be able to tell you what to focus on unless we know what is on the signs.
Okay. And I can definitely build out that sign schedule before the 13th. And so that we have content to review and look over all of that. And so, that's where the map is now was based, Austin asked me for a sign count. And so I looked at, the destinations and our corridors, and everywhere there is a decision point to like a decision to be made for a motorist. That's why there's a sign there. If you're heading south on Crane and Marvin Eford Park is to the east, then there's going to be a sign there, and so looking at how different people are navigating through the community is why right now we're sitting at 26 signs. And so I can definitely fill out the content of each of those, because each of those decision points was put there for a reason, and then we can sort of narrow it down and refine it from there.
Sounds good. Okay, so in summary, he's going to work on that. Once he has that, I'll send that to you all so we can be prepared for the next meeting. Sound good?
And he's going to send us some drawings in between too.
Yeah.
Today, maybe even.
Sound good, Sean?
Yes, I will get you those updates. I mean, that feedback was very easy tweaks to make. And so I will get that to you before the end of today.
Okay. Sean, do you need anything else from us, or are we good for the day?
I'm good for the day. This kind of gives me my marching orders, so I really appreciate it. Another productive meeting with you all. Really appreciate your time and your input, and looking forward to the next one.
Sounds good. Before we go, no action items. Of course, Sean's got his marching orders. You guys will just, once we send the email out, just respond to it. Board member comments. Anybody have any comments?
Just wondering if there's a consideration for there to be like by on time area signs, we can have Marvin area signs. I'm just throwing something out here. Because the area is what he's talking about, and that's what Valentine is all about. I'm wondering, is that the direction we're trying to go with this, or just curious? Okay, all right. Thank you.
I do have a question for you, because he's gonna send us this map.
So today you're gonna get revised signs. Once he's gonna work on the map, and once he sends that to me, I'll send that out to you. But that's not gonna be today. That'll be.
No, that's the one. The question is, once we get the map,
Mhm.
I don't want to call a lot of meetings, but I would like for us to get together and talk about Kim's point, and also priority of locations, where we all agree that we give him direction. Because we can beat this thing to death, and I don't want to beat it to death. And I value everybody's opinion here. It's just, frankly, Will brought up a good point to me. One of the gateway signs North Carolina, Village Marvin, North Carolina may make sense. And before sitting here, I would have said, no, I don't want North Carolina on any sign. So I value us getting together and kick this around, and then we go to council unified and not one-off conversations. I just don't see that.
So I think that's gonna be what we're gonna do at the next meeting, but when we send this out to you all, gather your thoughts and.
Should be a brainstorm.
I think that means,
It's very hard to. So I think what we've been saying is, if we're able to gather our feedback, gather our thoughts, send this back to me and I can send it to him. He can be ready at the next meeting for us to have this discussion where we can grind this out. So we don't have to come back 3 meetings down the line, because we want to keep going at it over which sign gets where.
Okay.
Can we put a pin in that? Put a pin in that for a minute, what Bob just said. Sean, are you good with us? Do you need anything else from us? Okay.
No, I'm good. Unless y'all need any other questions or anything like that, I've got, I got what I need for the day.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Thanks, John.
Y'all have a great day. Enjoy your week.
We're still recording. We still have to finish up here.
We need to have this conversation about him here. He is a wonderful person. They are doing an amazing job, but he gets super long-winded, and we need to be able to sit here and have a conversation and nail this down, because when he starts going at it, it's like everywhere, and then everybody's like, wait, what is happening now? I agree with Bob. We need to sit down, this committee and this group, once he sends us what each point is, and then we can look at it and be like, okay, does this make sense? I think this is number 1. Does this make sense? Yeah, this makes sense. Does this make sense? I don't think so, but we'll keep it on the list as maybe like our 4th iteration of going through and adding stuff to it.
Yeah, I didn't understand that. I apologize.
I know, and that is fine, but I knew where Bob was going, and didn't want to, because they're doing an amazing job and they're fantastic, but we need to talk about this before we do that.
So you want a special meeting?
Sean lays it out from a macro standpoint.
Yes, and
we just go in,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
yes, but we need to do that without him, because he gets.
Yeah,
Okay.
but I.
So do you want a meeting before the next meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's schedule that. Let's schedule that now, and we can get that figured out.
But we need to, because then when we come in, we can say, this is what we like, here you go, and we're not all talking, then he starts talking, and then it's like, and then we're 3 hours down the road.
So listen, I don't think we have to go back and tell them, take number 7 off. Like, we can do that internally.
Yes.
So-
Yeah.
They do need to be aware of that, though. They need to be aware of that, because removing signs can affect something else in the
But
plan.
I'm not necessarily saying we're gonna take something off. It may be prioritizing it. We've got levels.
For example, if you remove a sign that has destinations listed on it, and the next closest sign doesn't mention it at all, you could affect the effectiveness of the sign. So
Tell them that.
But that's why I said.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Know what each point is.
I know,
Like, you
I know.
you didn't know that is the next step. We need to know what it is,
So-
because then we can prioritize.
Okay, so let's pick a date.
It's 5 weeks from now, so
That's March 13th.
2.5, 3.
But it depends on when he can get us the map.
How about, let's see. Week before. Derek's out that week. Monday, February 27th. Monday, February 20th.
Yeah, I'm thinking we need to give him like 3 weeks.
March 1st. 2.5 weeks.
Perfect, at 11. Can you guys do that? March 1st?
Okay,
So
We have all budget requests due from the department. Is that gonna be a chaotic day?
No, good.
That day.
we're doing March
The
first.
requests are gonna be pretty short and simple.
so I'm gonna ask,
Hey, finance. Is that gonna be a chaotic day?
What about the 28th?
We're already having our budget meetings. just
Right.
Derek and
the budget, so Jill just pointed out the budget meetings that we're having with staff before this. This is like the very end of it.
The first is good then.
What are we doing?
Okay, first.
What time?
11 a.m. like we've been doing?
Yeah.
Okay, so I need someone to make a motion to amend the meeting schedule to add an additional meeting on Wednesday, March 1st at 11 a.m. Further discussion.
So,
All's in favor?
yeah.
All right.
That's a good point.
Mindy, any comments?
Did you just blurt that out?
Well, I'm going, I've never made it, I never made it around the table.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Christina,
No,
let's see, we've had Bob and Will, Derek. Jim,
okay,
you get a comment.
liaison is like a comment.
All right, can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting at 12:18 p.m.?
Amen.
All's in favor?
And that too.
Adjourn.
Isn't that bad?
It does go.
Can you stop?
Okay, let me turn off the lights. Let me turn off the lights.